What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 2 of We're Jabbin. I'm Kenji, a product designer, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Licheng. I am a UX researcher.
Great. Thanks for listening to us today. If you haven't joined us before, what we do on We're Jabbin is we talk about usually one topic broadly related to the field of UX, research and design, and technology. So one topic each week, and we go deep, and me and Licheng jab about it. So this week in our second episode, we're going to talk about, should I get a UX degree? If you don't know, Licheng and I both went to grad school. We went to the University of Michigan School of Information. That's where we met. And we both got our UX degrees there in human-computer interaction. Now I think they've changed that program, Licheng, to I think it's called just UX now. So whatever,
Really?
Millions of acronyms. Yeah.
Oh, crap. I know that they removed the GRE score requirement in the application, which I'm a little bit jealous. Because at that time we still have to apply for that. But either way, I remember, Kenji, that you also have a degree in MBA, right?
That's correct. Well, that's where we're going to lead into with this first question, which is kind of leading up to this. Is I'm curious as to what your background is and like how did you decide to go to grad school for UX?
You know, that's funny because I think there is tremendous uncertainty about how people get into UX, and really it's up to the individuals. But I think that in general, design and research have a very different kind of requirement and expectations in terms of background. So I can talk about research though, and then I will definitely poke your privacy.
Well, no, I'm curious just for your path, maybe 2 minutes, and I'll do my path too, right? You asked my MBA. About your path to UX research and like why you chose to go to UMSI.
Yeah, I think research, a lot of people in research had a background in academia. A lot of us do. I think these days, gradually people, have less and less, background in formal academia, PhDs and stuff like that. But when the field of research was established, that's mostly PhDs are doing human factor, doing studies in the formal lab setting, that having that one-way mirror and then, those fancy things. These days, it's not the case anymore. But for me, at least it's still the case. I was trying to be a professor, which means going through the whole, undergraduate degree and master degree and the PhD, and hopefully you will get a tenure track job, which most people didn't. So, that's my background. My background is in sociology, and the reason that we met in UMich is because at some point I realized that academia is not going to work for me. And a lot of people who are PhDs realized that halfway through, so they left the job or they got a degree and left academia with a traditional professorship, that kind of a career, and become UX researcher in the field. So sociology is my background, and data science was my intention when I joined HCI. So don't tell anybody else. Now, there's only people between you and the audience of this podcast knows that actually UX research wasn't my first choice. I was thinking about doing data science, but then, there's something about being a researcher that, I think there's certain qualities that people look for at being a researcher. Definitely crunching number and not talking to people is not part of that. So that's the one thing that drives me away from being a person who just do modeling and data modeling and data piping and stuff like that. So thing liking data.
So when you were at what, Chicago, right? University of Chicago.
Yeah,
is that right? I'm trying to big you up with that school.
Oh,
so when you were there, did you know about UX research when you were applying to SI and I assume other programs, or you didn't? What was your familiarity with UX?
Yeah, I hate you that you're digging my a black spot on my history.
I'm actively stalking I'm actually going through your transcripts right now. I see you got a 3.3 in this class, a 3.7 this year.
Now, ass kissing the professors, stuff like that. I don't have no idea what the heck is a UX. I never heard of it. I never thought about being in tech was part of my career goal. I always thought about some point I will end up being a professor teaching classes and doing research in, say, I don't know, a state university or a private school. So at that time, never thought about doing quote unquote industry jobs. So when I heard of it is when I believe after I left U Chicago, and I think I was reading something about a salary report, and then, and then there's such a thing like it got paid like what 100. There was average salary of like something in Bay Area for researchers like 110K starting, and I was like, well, if I start as a professor in sociology, I probably start at 60K, in some, state school. So
That's true.
That's the moment I'm like, wait a minute, you mean I can make money? So that got me interested. And then the more I read about it, it becomes something kind of like a unicorn that you can both do research and have real influence on decisions, on products, while helping people, which are users in this case, and also making money. And sometimes, and then make money. So I'm like, Jesus Christ, sign me up for this. And then the more the more I read about it. Unfortunately, when I apply for UMich, they offer scholarships, so that also helped too.
Yeah.
How about you though?
Yeah, for me, wow. I think it's like what you touched on, because for me is not similar. I mean, I was sociology, undergrad sociology / social psychology. My major.
Look at you.
So I had considered PhDs for social psych. Actually, I was working with a professor, but that's tangential path. But I think what's interesting is that these like UX seems oftentimes, maybe now it's more popular. There's online programs here and there, but like it's a very nebulous field. Even the term UX sucks, I think. It's like, So my background is I was working in the Bay Area. I worked at Yelp, was not super early there, but one of the first like 300 employees or so. Was working in sales actually there. And even though I was in the Bay Area and working in sales, we're so divided from the engineering like floors. They kept sales was like in the basement, engineers were getting the massages on the top floor. So I didn't really know how the product was built. I knew that obviously we had engineers, but I never knew that there were things called designers. So I had no idea about UX while I was at Yelp. Stayed there for a couple of years. I went to then left to like go start my own company, like every asshole in the Bay Area. I was like a 24-year-old kid, and I was like, oh, it's time to go start a company. When that failed, you mentioned getting an MBA, so I was like, okay, I still want to do something like entrepreneurial. I want to be creative in that sense. So I went to that's what brought me to Michigan. Originally came for my MBA at Ross. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I was sitting in accounting classes, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is this hurts my brain. So I decided to like start looking across campus, and found this like UX event that was going on at School of Information, like a design jam, and it was really at that time I was like, oh wow, like this is a thing we can do. Is actually like, because I was still like interested in like the people and aspect of things from like my sociology background. And I was really interested in tech because that's what brought me out to the Bay Area in the first place, but just didn't know this existed. And I still wanted to do something like creative. And I thought like, oh, well, originally it was going to be entrepreneurial things. So then I did a dual degree with SI and Ross. But I knew then I was like, I'm going to more so skew and do design work full time. I don't want to do, even though I did an internship in like product marketing after my first year of business school before I started SI, I knew like I wanted to do something in design in UX for sure. I was debating research or design for a little while. I was still figuring out the field, but that's my path.
You know what's funny? That I think, I don't know how representative we are, but I think it's very common or pretty safe to assume that nobody when they start like college, they say, I want to be in UX. It's very, less likely. One is because in the past, there are not many undergrad degrees dedicated for UX or having a target goal for training you to become a UX professional, which means that most people come with a deep background or degree in other fields, and then they got interested in this. And secondly, I think like one of the reasons why people like UX, at least for me, is that it's a combination of three elements, right? It's human, business, and technology. So each side could attract their own people, and then they just, go through some interesting life journey and then ended up with UX. So as long as you are in the three bigger areas, either your communication degree, or whatever, you touch upon this three area, there is a chance that you might ended up in the UX, as UX is the intersection of all three.
For design, I think I would add like a fourth for those of like art or some sort of, that's not my background, but I think a lot of people who get into design, especially if they're coming from like graphic design, are like the human, maybe there's like a one of those things, maybe not so much business often, but like some sort of art aspect plus technology. Creative, like the creative aspect for sure. That gets them.
Like web design and graphic design and then, stuff like that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. Okay, so how about when you got to Michigan, you were saying that you were originally going to do data science. How did you decide? And so for background for our two listeners out there as well, for our partners essentially, for background at UMich, at least, like you go into the program, you don't like declare a major or anything right away. So some people, a lot of times, myself included, you sounds like yourself, is like you're exploring out, do you want to go into research? Do you want to go design? Do you want to go data science? There's also like a library science track as well, and some other tracks that people don't really do. So how did you decide, or how did you know that you wanted to do research when you were at UMich?
Yeah, like I might be biased, that I think people who become a researcher tend to have certain qualities, and maybe that's an assumption, maybe that's true, I don't know, which are people who tend to like to do more strategic work or do more strategic influences on decisions at job. But people who want to do more hands-on, like stuff, they might ended up with like design track or stuff like that. So for instance, the reason I landed on with research, okay, now I think some people from UMich gonna get really pissed with me, but I took this class called graphic design, and I'm so glad I did it. It was super fun. It was one of the most interesting classes because I never got to design anything in my life. Think about a sociology inspired professor, trying to study on, organizational behavior and social network, doing graphic design. Like that just like doesn't go together. So, and I thought about like, yeah, that's interesting. Let me take it. Right after the class, I'm like, okay, I cannot be a designer just because like the day-to-day that represent that kind of career track, like just does not, sing with me at all. I just cannot imagine myself moving pixels, as well as saying that, should we, like, the questions we think, in my head, the question I need to think if I become a designer is colors, shapes, and stuff like that. But what my brain really...
Moving pixels, Licheng, is shots fired. That's shots fired.
See, I know that, but hey, that's the impression I get when I take that class. I'm not saying that everyone that's the main focus of their job, but the wrong impression maybe I got is that, oh my God, that's going to be something I have to consider every day now, like shapes, colors, layouts and stuff like that. Shapes. But my brain really what it thinks about is that how people think, how people behave, how people, make decisions. So it's a different kind of, questions you want to answer. So I would say that, people who want to decide which track to go for, the more they know about themselves, right? Do you want to answer what type of question, what type of lifestyle you want to have, what type of, problem you want to solve will help to answer which area to pick. But for me, I got there by trial and error. After trying graphic design, I'm like, I don't think my DNA is designed for this.
Yeah.
So that's a good to know, right?
Which I think is like the benefits, right? Of like I mean, any type of, that's like when you go to college and undergrad, you get to try different things. And then you can see, like, does this resonate with me? Like you said, you couldn't foresee yourself pushing pixels for the rest of your life, quote unquote. So, that's the benefit of like a collegial atmosphere is you get to try something for 3 months and decide, hey, is this something I'm interested in?
And you know what's funny is that this is probably a mentality when people are at school that people have. At least I had that. I don't know if I want to hear your stories though about that. Is that people try to decide their lifelong career, and that's just not the case. I have people who were designers and transitioned to become a researcher, who were researchers and transitioned to become PMs, and so it's always a fluid. So like you said, like trying is always encouraged. Especially you were younger, when you have more opportunity to try, like in school,
or you're just less you're less risk averse as well, right?
Exactly,
you're more able to seek risks. You most likely have no family or other things. If you fail, you can just try something else.
Start over again.
Yeah. I think that's the same thing in terms of people do try to figure things out like right away. I mean, I went to business school, that all the people there are like freaking out of like, oh, I need to get this job because my last job sucks. I'm transitioning careers. Now I'm freaking out. I need to figure out what I want to do because I was a brand manager before and now I want to go to something else or whatever it might be. But that's very much like when we all know that the average person changes their career, like 5-6 times. So they're changing all the time, even if it's small changes and iterations. So trial and error is, of course, like a big thing. For me to go back and answer that question of like, how did I choose design out of those tracks, plus all the business school tracks I could have gone down? Well, I knew business school after my product marketing internship, although I loved my time with Zendesk. I'm actually rocking my old Zendesk shirt right now in product marketing. I love the people
sponsored
there. Sponsored by Zendesk. Not sponsored by Zendesk. But I really like the people there, super smart and people, but I didn't love doing product marketing work. I wanted to be like closer to the product, to the creation of the product itself. And so that was another driving factor for like, I know I'm going to do a UX internship for my second internship during grad school. For me, I was still figuring it out probably until several months before graduation of like, I knew I wanted to do design. I still don't really know what design meant in actuality, because I think the HCI program very much like focused you, at least at the time, and in my head, it was like very much focused around like prototyping and wireframes and not this concept of like a full UX UI designer. So I took graphic design and I hated that class because I was not artistic. I came from like a social sciences background, was artistic. I just didn't vibe with the way it was taught. I didn't understand why we had to learn like color theory or things like that. And later then like self-taught or took online courses, which we'll talk about later, but that I felt like taught visual design, UI design in a much more practical way. So my education for that side of things came really after graduation. And once I was already working and seeing like what my other designers, what we actually do versus what I thought a designer did while I'm still in grad school. But for me in school, I still knew like when we were in our usability class, I was like, yeah, research is cool. But I want to get to that point of like, I'm using some research to go create something, go build something. And like, I want to like get over that hump of, hey, I've learned a bunch of stuff and I'm not necessarily like handing this off to somebody else to go create it. I want to get as close to the product as possible. That's why I went down the design route, and I'm super happy at what I did.
But you know what I want to know more though, because I never had this struggle. Should I decide on design or versus research? I came from, talking about a person almost become a professor. It was very clear for me, that, research is the way to go, or if not research, because I was thinking about data science, right? So anything analytical is something I'm going to end up with. So that was very clear to me. But I was curious about your struggle at that moment deciding, like, design or research, or maybe not a struggle, but a thought. Because I know a bunch of people while we're in school that they try to decide on, design versus research. So how did you come through that journey and landing on design? And do you have any suggestion for people who are going through the same journey right now?
That's a good question. I think part of it's like trial and error, right? So you're trying out different things. If you get an internship, that's great. I had an internship in general UX at a startup in Brooklyn where I was able to do both research and design. And I don't think you necessarily have to pick either, quote unquote, pick. Because if you work for, let's say, even at like Duo, of course, bigger companies, they're going to have very specialized, maybe designers don't do any research at all. Which could be another topic, whether that's problematic or not. But a lot of companies now, like designers, do some research. They're doing, some research as part of their and usability testing and things that are in the research process. It's maybe not as hardcore as something you would do, but you are still doing research as part of your job. So I think that decision to like split off is not necessarily the case. You don't have to necessarily do that. I would say that but it's consideration when I was looking for jobs of like understanding, hey, how much research does this designer do versus, and how much access do you have to users? Some companies don't really prioritize that, right? And their designers are just going off of their design feel and their design gut, and maybe they'll only do usability testing for like major big projects. I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, but for me, or for I guess advice I would give if you're trying to figure it out is just like trial and error, just seeing what classes you like, seeing which parts of the process, go through the kind of design process. Any school or boot camp, whatever, are going to put you through the full spectrum of things, and you can pick out parts of like, hey, this really gives me energy. I find myself kind of losing myself in the work at this part, right? For me, I find myself often, if I'm like working in Sketch and I'm actually like doing design, I find myself losing myself during the work more so there than if I'm conducting an interview and having to synthesize that information. Like that takes extra work for me that is not quite as enjoyable as doing the actual design work.
Yeah, I think there's a common theme that as we speak that, is about experiencing as a way to answer the question of which one you should choose. Because I still have this feeling that a lot of people think, which rightfully so, that people think, oh, I paid money for grad school or whatever program they're in for their diploma or whatever. So I have to have, choose which discipline I want to be in as a result or deliverable of that college experience or diploma experience. So, which I think if we flip it and say that, it's actually not asking you to choose the degree or the program, it's not asking you to choose, but help you to choose. So that might be a better way to think about it. That, when you graduate, it's not the end result of this, career. It's just a kickoff of your career. So it only helps you to understand a discipline rather than asking you to choose one. So it's totally fine that, you chose one, given the best information you have at that moment. For job purposes, because I know a lot of people go to school because they want a better job, like I did, back then. Yeah. So you can totally transition over time. So
absolutely. Could I point something out that you reminded me of something of like one thing I wish I did more during SI? I mean, I explored a lot, right? Because I started at MBA. I was like, Michigan has so many good grad programs. They have like 17 grad schools. I'm like, I'm going to bounce to every program and go to like this event at the architecture school, this event at policy, and just see like what interests me or what piques my fancy. And I think like that's super important that a lot of people don't do during grad school is just like, hey, understand that this is sometime, yes, you got to figure out some sort of a path to go down, but this is the time to really explore and like go to this event, go to this different school. Like you don't have to stay, if you're lucky, as I felt like we were, if you're lucky to be in a bigger school that has a diverse set of programs. Like if you went to other schools, you see that as well, MIT or Harvard or wherever. It's like, go explore outside of that realm if you think you're still trying to figure things out, rather than like, oh, I'm in business school, I need to stick in this lane. And I wish I still did more exploration. Like, I wish I had done research with professors, like worked on projects with more, got more involved one-on-one with professors on things they're working on, and like really went down that route. And I think that's what I would say. If you get the chance to go to a program like UMich or another HCI program, like just go full on and try to explore as many different avenues and try new things, right? Try design clinic, or try research with a professor. Because it's basically like what's the word? There's no failure. There's no consequences for failure.
Okay, so what's your overall thought? Because we have been talking about UMSI, right? So there's so much more that a designer and researcher can learn from just like a degree program. So, but what's your overall opinion, especially the pros and cons of programs like that?
Yeah, I think with so we did our degree there, so our HCI degree, and I think these programs, at least for SI, right, it tended to be very academic, and it's a pro in terms of very much we learned the process, learned the basics of research, learned the basics of design. So that was really good, just in terms of like, hey, introduction to a design process. However, a con, and I'm going to look at this through the lens of like my experience at the business school, is I think you can put those two programs on like different ends of the spectrum. SI, UMSI, very academic. Ross, business school, very much career oriented, focused that, hey, for all the students, we're driving you into industry. So let's help you prepare for that. So I think that's something that I really wished, and I assume is not quite as emphasized at HCI programs, is like career development, thinking of your classmates as your future network, and like really building that camaraderie. Because now we're out in the field, we've been out of school for 3 years. It would be nice to have that same like, hey, yeah, we can reach out to classmates, and there's that, we'll help you because you went to our same program. And I think that's where some of these programs seem to be missing the mark, that for 99% of people in a HCI program, they want to go to industry, become designers or researchers. Yet there isn't that culture built in of like networking and thinking about this through that lens. It's very much academic, focus on grades, focus on just solely the education aspect.
Which is funny because like it sounded like I might be crazy right here, but that a school like or like a degree program like this almost have a binary position compared to with professional school. Because the information I got from what you just said, which I actually think the same, is that something like most HCI program does not care too much about building career than just teaching skills. Right. So do you think there are other programs out there that might actually combine both, or be more aware that there is a career component of it? But I agree with you though, like when I was at UMSI, there are definitely times I'm like, I really wish they teach more than just like, how to finish a wireframe, right? Like, but about like how to use a wireframe in a business context to make it more effective, and why we need to do a wireframe even. And is that even a good thing to do with your teammates? Bob, John, and Peter.
or even, I think we've talked a little bit about this before, the idea of like, you hinted here of just like, you're not just doing this for fun, or, I mean, I like doing my work, but you're doing it in a context of a business or you're having to like persuade people, present to people. And so it like goes far past any of like the basic skills in academic. You have to be able to like, persuade your product manager or your engineers why this feature needs to be built. And like none of that, from what I know, is being taught in programs like this, in academic programs where your professors are very much researchers. They love to do research. They're not somebody who's necessarily worked in the industry and is trying to help you navigate like the political bureaucracies. and you may
Right.
deal with that more than I do. But
We went there. We went there. Office politics.
So what? So it sounds like we kind of both agree that's like there's like this dynamic or dichotomy between like academic and industry. Any other thoughts, or what were your? Did you have other thoughts just on like your pros and cons of it coming from the research side?
No, I actually agree with you a lot that sometimes the school cannot provide everything you need. You have to be aware about what you need and what school can provide and which one it cannot, so that you have to make it up, by yourself. But I was curious, since you were in business school, so you probably have this stronger sense of comparison, I assume, between programs. So is there anything you did that helped you to gain that sense of, industry feel while you were at school, where anything worked?
I think that's a great question. And I think like one of the things was just several things. So one was like on my job search, I did try to network as much as possible and like use those learnings. I hate the word networking, but like I reached out to a lot of people. And even as I was trying to get into the field, I was like, I don't know what UX really is. Like, let me go talk to people. And so there's probably there was like less of this internal barrier that I think a lot of our classmates faced of like, I'm scared to reach out to people. I use the student card of, hey, I'm a student. I'm here to learn. I want to learn about UX. Let me go reach out to you. And so I very much was, I think Ross helped with that aspect of like, hey, people you have some sort of connection to will oftentimes help you out. So, and even if they don't, it's like, you don't lose anything. So I definitely, I guess like, what's the word? Like that became part of me of like feeling fine to reach out, ask questions, ask for career advice, and also like not be afraid to reach outside of like oftentimes I'd reach out to anyone who is either from Michigan or also had done like an HCI program and say like, hey, I'm a student. I'm thinking about going to UX. I'm currently in this program. Can we chat for 20 minutes? I have a specific question about XYZ, or I just want to like learn about your career path because maybe it looks similar to mine. So I think, and that was certainly something that maybe like came from the more Ross side of things than
it sounds like, it sounds like a mentality, like, no, it being very intentional while you're at school that, I'm here to explore, right? So by the way, I hate this word about networking too. I feel it's so like outcome driven, like, but actually the process of networking is actually more like a process of exploring. So it's not like hey, today I'm going to know 50 people, that kind of thing. Is more like hey, I'm curious about this thing. So who can help me to get there faster or more deeper, right? Than me doing that individually. So something like it's mindset.
I think it's definitely a mindset and a culture that's built in because there's this thing of, as I reach out to Ross alumni, it wasn't like, hey, how come you're reaching out? It was known like, hey, we do this all the time. I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to sit down in a conversation. Now, when I reach out to some folks who may have gone to like SI, it would oftentimes be crickets, or it'd be like, oh, if you have questions, would you mind just sending me an email? And so there wasn't that like same, hey, same like sense of community instilled of, hey, we all like did this program. I know you're learning things. You're still a student, and like, let me help you. And so I try to do that now with any student that hits me up. But I feel like that kind of community sense needs to be more instilled in programs like this to make it more worth it.
You're right. That's more like about culture, because it sounds like it's definitely the network effect here, right? So the more people who are thinking like you are willing to both reach out and also being open to be reached out to will help more other people like to be part of this kind of mentality and this type of process. So I agree. I have the similar story. I feel like when we're at school, everybody have a different kind of mindset. It's kind of like student mindset that we're being evaluated, that what we do here is going to be converted into GPA, and then we'll be converted into internship, and the internship will be converted into a job. Almost like there's a scorecard for everything, like a check. So, but in the other way, if we look at it from other perspective, the school is just a means to the end, right? The end is to know the field, know what you want to get to and how to get there. So it's not the end of it. So if you got 3.6, fantastic.
No,
You know, you were shaking head. I thought you were gonna say no, it's too bad. Like, so I thought you were gonna say like, you gotta get 4.0. No, like 4.0.
No, I'm only half Asian, so I don't think of 3.2.
Yeah, I agree with you though. Yeah.
You were saying something there of so but I think that also the last thing is like you are learning the field, you're learning the industry, but you also should be trying to create relationships with your classmates, because what you understand, it's like I had a crazy experience where while I was working at Ford, I was on a call with a supplier. It was like a design call. We were thinking about like using the stuff that I designed versus what the supplier had designed. And on that call was one of our classmates. So it just shows you like who had designed the other thing. So it shows you how small the field is. And so like understanding that or like making sure that, yes, you're here to learn the field, but also like create these relationships, because 10 years down the road, most likely these people are still going to be working in this very small field. And like, so why wouldn't you want to know them or get to know them or like still share ideas or do things like to keep this community going, basically?
Yeah. All right. I failed at that, honestly. I wish I did more.
It's very tough. I mean, you have to basically try to change the culture of a whole program. And some people are just there like, I'm here to get short-term thinking. I'm here to get this job right now because, and it makes sense if you're an international student, like I need a job right now or else I have to be out of this country in 6 months or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's true. I think some of us do have different kind of considerations or more considerations than some other parts of the student body. Like some, they have to be more, and honestly, like there's so many, okay, we're not going there talking about politics. So it's going to be opening a Pandora's box. It's not going to be fun. So, but I do agree that, talking about being empathetic, right? So there are some of us really need to think a lot, like being more like a goal or outcome driven, that they need to get something by the end of certain time, when they graduate, after they graduate. Do you think still that would be helpful to build this long-term relationship? If they have a short-term goal, they have to hit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, but most people are looking. Well, I should juxtapose that with like at Ross, we still had, so UMSI for context is about 60% international. At Ross, MBA school, around 35% international. So you still have those international classmates. It was just even if they were thinking short-term thinking, the culture of the school like forced them to, because everyone else was trying to build relationships, they were also going to be forced into that type of thing as well. And then, of course, everyone is super concerned at Ross anyway about like, they are very much short-term thinking of, hey, I need a job. I'm here to get a job. But secondarily, it's to build my network, because most people are switching careers from whatever to whatever. So they are short-term thinking, but then also trying to think long-term in terms of getting to know their classmates for future benefits and also just to make friends. So I think it is. I think it is possible. Yeah, I think it is possible.
Yeah, I think we have been talking a lot about like formal degrees, right? And for a lot of people, that's the only way to get trained. But these days, like they're like LinkedIn, and what's the other ones that you see all the time on YouTube being promoted, like Brilliant.com and then whatever. So that kind of like skill learning and like non-traditional, programs to learn about UX. What's your thought on those?
So for those, I think we'll probably have different thoughts, right, from a design and research standpoint. Yeah. So I block these into maybe 3 categories. You have like, on-the-job training. So if you can somehow switch into design, you have boot camps, things like General Assembly, a block is now actually full-time online. And then also just straight up online programs like Design Lab. And then also Jared Spool has like a separate for-profit UX school. And I think 5th is like you kind of mentioned, like online courses or just learning tutorials from like YouTube and other ways and kind of like putting together your curriculum there. So I see, at least for design, is those are typically like 5 ways that are kind of more in the non-traditional route. I can't say what the pros and cons of those might be. However, I think there is like the information is out there in terms of there's certainly plenty for design, at least, like especially if you want to do UI design. There's so many good online courses. There's online courses I've taken, like Learn UI Design by Eric Kennedy. Free plug, not sponsored this podcast, but there are definitely UI design courses that I felt like I benefited from a ton. What those don't give you necessarily is like real world project experience. So you'll still have to kind of fight, either work for a nonprofit for free or figure out ways to actually take this information, if you do an online course, and apply it to some sort of a real design project. Now, from what I understand, things like General Assembly or Design Lab, some of these more structured programs will help you in terms of setting you up with clients to get these projects. I would say, from my experience, it was very interesting leaving UMSI in that when I left, it was hard to get that first job. However, once I was even working at my job as a product designer for 6 months, then like recruiters started hitting you up. There's like pattern match, like, oh, I see you are now a product designer. Let's get you here. And so where I'm going with this is that a lot of times for those boot camps or coming out, like your hardest thing is going to be getting that first job. And then once you do get that job, then it's like easier to get the next job, the next job, the next job. So it's a matter of, I think, just like preference, how you learn, and what your life status is as well, right? Like, can you, we went to a 2-year program. You took off 2 years. I did 3 years, took off 3 years of my life, quote unquote. So it was 3 years of opportunity cost, not earning an income. If I'm a father with 2 children at home and I need an income, I probably would do something different, a part-time program or something part-time like General Assembly or self-teaching. So
I can imagine you having
so many
kids,
of
though.
I'm trying to put that off as long as possible.
Well, we'll see. Like, I have a feeling that it's not like I'm trying to predict the future, but I have a feeling that you will have kids earlier than you thought. So if that happens, don't come correct. And kill me. All right.
I'm going to refer to episode 2 podcast, We're Jabbin, and say, okay, Licheng jinxed me.
And then Licheng dead.
What are your thoughts from the research side of things, like other routes to basically get into this field besides for an HCI program, let's say?
Yeah, like I was, like I'm not gonna hide it that I have a complicated, relationship. I never worked with anyone who came from. I know it sounds like I'm like I'm a CEO. I've been working with other CEOs, but philosophically, because I never worked with someone who came from non-degree programs. Like so, and on high level, at high level, actually, I think that's a great idea. If you can shrink a lot of things you need to learn to the most essence of it, like a bootcamp, and being taught by someone who's already in the industry, that sounds like perfect. That's what I wanted, when I was at school, right? We went to a 2-year program. Basically every semester, I'm just like, I really wish this is a 1-year program. And then it was taught by all the, the badass, UXers in the industry. And if you transfer that sounds like exactly what those other programs are delivering. So that sounds great. But I think there is something is going to be missed, research or not research, wise. One is that, like we were talking about, why you go to a traditional degree is that you can explore. So I was curious how many people know what they wanted it, and they have to commit so much financial resources upfront to dedicate to something they don't know as much as they wish that they can. So basically, it's asking you that, hey, do you want to be a chef or you're a police officer? Decide now. Give us $20,000. We will train you. So it's just such a from a consumer perspective, because they are commercial goods, right? So from a consumer perspective, I don't know what I'm going to get out of it. And also I lost this chance to explore. Oh, maybe I like this. Maybe I don't like this. That's where the traditional university can provide you a little bit more. At least I have more tolerance for it. So for those programs, yes, it makes perfectly sense that everyone wants it, and then they can get trained, and you get everything. Great. You finish in 10 weeks, and that's fantastic. But I question, just like UXers, right? We know that humans think we know what we want, but it turns out that we don't. So I question how many people actually have that much of clarity about themselves. And I wonder how many people came to those programs or came to UX in general, just saying that, hey, I heard that UX people doesn't need to code and then make a lot of money. Let me try it. So I wonder how many people actually in that route. So if that's the case, is that a good idea to go for that route versus going to a degree program where you probably can explore more a little bit? So that's an area I don't know. But for research specific, I also feel like research is a skill, but also it's a sense of philosophy almost that you need to uphold. So for the skill side, it's easy, right? Anyone who can follow a script can, technically speaking, calling you are doing usability testing. But doing research is more than just like I speak those words and I talk to customers, then I'm a researcher. Aha. It's more about, we have been talking about it. So that, and this is about buzzword, honestly, that research is about.
Are you going to say synergy? Or can we put out some MBA buzzwords? Synergy.
Oh, please. Synergy.
Network effects, Porter's 5 forces.
And do you have
synergy some more? Win-win, a win-win-win business model.
Yes, you're going there. I love it. So let's have an episode just talking about all the buzzword.
Honestly, I would love to do that. I want to do an episode that is just us actually talking about buzzwords from work that are non-human. Like, hey, can we sync with this? Can I chat with you with you offline about this? It's like that's these nonsense words that don't make any sense that you don't say. Like, if you don't say these human words outside of work, you don't say like, oh, can I sync with you on this? Hey, if we're talking, hey, can I sync with you at the Raspberry Patch this weekend? It's like, no. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, what was the buzzword you were talking about?
Oh, no. Like, I mean, speaking speaking as a person who learns English as a second language, right? Yeah, I almost feel I'm speaking another language when I have to speak a buzzword.
Third language. Office speak is third language, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just like, what is this? And the worst thing is that people expect you to know it. And then you're like, I don't know. What does that mean? I'm going to be the dumb guy, in the room. So there's so much anxiety and it doesn't promote more productivity. So sometimes it makes you question like what we're doing. But either way, I digress. Talking about research. Is that what I was talking about?
Yes. You were about to mention a research buzzword.
Oh,
yeah.
It's about skill and mindset. So technically speaking, everyone can be a researcher if they follow a process. We're talking about skills, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing as design. Everyone can draw. Well, I think most people can draw, like, excluding me. But most people can draw.
Most people can click and make rectangles on a screen, which is a lot of what you quote unquote do with design. The output is going to be clicking buttons.
Exactly. So if we're talking about design, those actions like research or design out of context, then yes, everyone is a designer, right? Because you can always like put a color on something, then you can put something on top of another thing, and there are tools out there make it super easy. 10 chances are you're gonna be pretty good, better than you thought. So which is fantastic. And same thing for research, right? So everyone, can speak to a customer and probably get something out of the conversation. So in a sense, yes. But we're talking about research and design out of context. The real context we're talking about in the business setting, right, is that to reduce the business risk, right? So for design, is that how can we achieve this effect with minimum resources, right? So if turn out that a designer needs to take 10 months to finish something other person can finish in 2 hours, I'm exaggerating here, right? Yeah, that person is a designer. Probably nobody gonna say that's a great designer. Same thing for researcher, right? So if you can talk to customers or collect data from different ways, or qualitative or quantitative or whatever, tools makes it really easy these days. But it turns out that you actually help the team to make the wrong decision. Yeah, you are a researcher, but are you researcher too? Did you do your job? So that's the part I wonder if how much you can get from non-degree program. I'm not saying that degree program will guarantee to teach you more, but there is something, very subtle, more than just like follow this process to finish your usability testing, and research is more than usability testing, right? So I don't know in 10 weeks how much you can learn from it. And I learned I almost become an academic person. So when I started in sociology, I forgot what was the first lesson, but there was something fancy happened in that class, and then the professor basically sold me on it. It's basically, what is science? That was the question. What is science? I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, everybody think about scientists like you have a lab coat and then you just like putting things together, bang, something come out from an experiment. Oh, you're doing science. But then if you think about it, the evolution theory of evolution, there's no experiment on it. There's no fancy computer involved, but that's such a lasting, powerful research done as a purely based on observation, right? There's low tech kind of research. What makes that type of research better than some fancy but actually not effective research? It's about this insight, this eyes to pick out signal from noises. So that's what a great researcher do. Even with whatever tool, it will help them to pick signal from noises. I question, I don't know, maybe I'm very wrong, but in 10 weeks, how much we can get, or 10 months, how much we should get,
Well, I guess the question I want to dig back on that is I liked a lot of I liked a lot of what you said in terms of, even as you were mentioning, like for design, you could have a designer who makes something that's amazing, but doesn't communicate with their PM or their engineers and understand like, hey, this thing I designed, is it technically feasible? Like, so having those things doesn't come out of just like learning something on a YouTube channel, for sure, of just like, what I've designed, is it something that one solves the actual user problem, and two, is it something that's technically feasible? So like that communication aspect, super important. What I was going to ask you was, like, you mentioned this idea of questioning whether you can get basically a researcher's mindset or almost like a scientist mindset outside of a academic program. And I'd want to throw it back and say, like, is that something you got out of UMSI or cultivated on your own? Yes, period. Question. That's my question.
I think both. So, I like you to talk about it because we're asking about how journey, right? We introduce ourselves, how we become researchers. And that
you're a designer. Yes.
Right. I'm a researcher. You're a designer. There you go. So I think both. So I learned something, how to put my researcher mindset that already nurtured quite a bit before coming to USI to the field of UX. That's something I didn't know, right? And I learned that from UMSI, and I think that's very valuable, honestly. But before that, through self-learn, through other degrees I have been to, that taught me how to have them, taste that, handling data. That's something that probably I learned a lot beyond and outside of UMSI. So talking about that, designer case, right? So anyone can draw circles, anyone can produce something, right? But how do we know we're solving a problem? So now that's research can help us to answer, right? And then how confident we are, really we're solving the right answer. Because everyone can make a guess too, right? Say that, this is the question or the problem that user have and the business have, and this is exactly the solution for it, or stuff like that. So there's a lot of things about certainty, and you have to, really answer with confidence. And a researcher will help to reduce that kind of guesswork. So which is interesting is that 10 weeks, it might get you somewhere. It's better than zero, right? So learning, doing research, the good process will give you a lot of good data. But you are probably 60% confident that, out of this usability study I've done, I'm pretty confident that the issues I detected in this testing is the actual issues that users have right now. And my suggestion is actually the best solution for those issues. But maybe a better researcher, through many other things, could say that increase that 60% confidence to 85. So, but that's very subtle now. It's beyond just like following a script. that, we know that this is the issue because you can introduce bias. There's so many things can go wrong in there. So maybe it's a great way. Like I really like you said, a lot of learning, a lot of growth once you get a job. You can learn this much more. Like you guys probably cannot see it, but I'm trying to make my finger really far away from each other. Exactly. I think like if we kept the scope of those program as a quick bring you up to speed, that type of mindset, I think that's fantastic. But if someone come to those programs having a mindset that I'll be one of the most competitive people in the market and a really, really great designer, that might be interesting. So that might be, we need to talk about like.
That means that might be false.
Yeah. Now, see, that's another like office talk, like interesting. Probably means that
interesting means, oh, bullshit.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are going to hate me after this episode.
But I think what you said applies to the way I feel is after our HCI program, like I learned the basics of design, let's say basics, principles, process, stuff like that. But then once I hit the job is like when I felt like my eyes opened up. I was like, oh my God, I have so much more to learn. And it was almost like we got our masters in HCI, but I didn't feel like I realized I was no master in anything, right? Like there was still so much learning for me to do. And so I think I don't know, I kind of look at like all of these together in terms of that they're just your springboard into the industry. And then once you get in, you realize that there's just like so much more to learn, right? There's just HCI, they don't teach you about design systems, for instance, or anything like that. So they're just like, this is just like your taste of the field. And the benefit, like you mentioned, of like a grad school program, it gives you some time to explore. Whereas you have to know for certain, hey, if I'm paying $1,200 for General Assembly, I have to know that after 10 weeks, this is what I want to do, or else I've just spent $10,000 on not much.
Yeah. And that's an interesting conversation a lot of people have right now about how do we evaluate education in general? So that's why a lot of people, especially among millennials, they're saying that I really wish I didn't take that degree, that cost me blah, blah, blah amount of money, because I don't know how much benefit I get out of it. So it's a question, actually, I think a lot of traditional degree programs need to think about. If someone go through that 2-year, degree program, how do we know they actually accomplish their goal? And what is actually the goal, in the first place even? It's just those questions that a lot more heavier on the non-degree programs because they sell you a future that you will get a job.
Yes.
So that's like, we hold them more strictly, about that. So, but if you're talking about network, I'm pretty confident to say that those programs probably place more emphasis on networking and, more than, academic programs like UMSI.
Probably.
Maybe.
Who knows? All right, let's wrap things up for this week. Just want to segue over to what's going on with you this week. What did you learn? What have you been reading, watching?
You go first, please. I need to take a sip.
Go first. If you need to take a sip. So for me, a couple things that I've been reading is one is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. This was like super popular on tech Twitter. Naval is the co-founder of AngelList, founder of ePinions, and kind of has like transitioned to this like tech guru, which is why I was skeptical of him. But he somebody had like compiled his tweets, his podcast episodes, and put them into like a free book about like life, happiness, philosophy. Very good read. Definitely recommended. I read it in like 2 or 3 days. The other thing that kind of got me thinking this week was a book called Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. The general gist of this book is talking about like creating feedback loops in life and like learning from failure. But what I was interested from this book particularly was he linked off to some studies that were done by Charlene Nemeth, who's a UC Berkeley psych professor. And so this research was really interesting because she's done a lot of work on like creativity, groupthink, and brainstorming. And it kind of seemed a lot of her research seemed to go against everything that we do in our field in terms of brainstorming. So I'll link to it in our show notes, and I still have to dive a little bit more into research. But basically, in one of her studies, she found that when people do brainstorming with like criticism and debate, they actually produce better and more ideas than just like the free flowing, hey, let's brainstorm without any type of debate of these ideas. So it kind of like goes against a lot of these things of like, hey, when you're doing design thinking, it's just like no idea is bad. So a lot of her research actually is like thinking about dissent and how criticism can actually improve creativity, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. I don't know how, because like that's something I'm really curious about. One is I'm not really good at, facilitating that kind of brainstorming workshop because I don't know. I don't know. I'm not really good at that. But I'm interested in the conclusion though for that. I'm just curious how generalizable is that conclusion, because I wonder does it say, for instance, does it apply to every field or is it certain scenarios and stuff like that? I can see why it's helpful because there are definitely moments that after a brainstorm session, I'm like, some of them are really junk, and it wastes a lot of time to talking about junk ideas. But so if there's somebody there giving you a little bit, guidance and feedback, so I hope criticism help us to keep focused, right? That was the.
I think the idea there is not necessarily have junk. Well, you probably do have junk, but that by even having some criticism, that those can spur new ideas. So that's like the key point there. That like you could have someone say something that is critical but totally wrong, but if they truly believe it, that could still like lead off into like new areas that weren't originally thought of. Is essentially like it kind of forces everyone's brain to work a little harder.
Yeah, I that's what I was saying, the whole generalization of that, because I can totally see that criticism serve a function of providing feedback, right? So that your brain is not like free roaming. Like it gives you a little bit, also prompt you to think about things that you didn't anticipate probably. So I wonder that maybe there's other ways, giving, say like, hey, we have talked about this a lot, how about those things we didn't think about? So that's my thought. But I would love to read more.
I'll definitely share more. This is a future blog post for me too. How about you? What's been going on?
Oh, nothing. Like compared to you, I am a very illiterate person this week.
This is just my time to shit on you. Actually, I just say, hey, Licheng, this is all reading I've done. What reading have you done? You are illiterate.
I read 2 books. What did you accomplish? And that's why I drink. No, I've been moving this week, and that's why I got myself sick. Not COVID, I hope. But I'm in a spree. 2 days ago, I'm in the spree of rereading some kind of classic books that a lot of people recommend in our field. For instance, Hooked, right? So I probably read that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I forgot, but a while ago. My memory started to blur these days. And I just want to see that maybe I would take another perspective, and then if I learn a little bit more from that. And honestly, I still didn't. I read 1/3 of the book, didn't finish yet, but I still don't feel I learned anything more. But I like the example, if you guys are interested, the Bible app, case study in that book. And that's actually really, really good, but it does not apply to a lot of work we do. Because many of us in the B2B environments, that's a very scoped down, complex situation. Versus in the B2C environments, you can be creative and then blah, 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 stuff like that. So that's interesting. So I'm rereading probably 3 to 4 books, for the rest of a few weeks. So maybe that's another thing we can talk about next time, sometime. The classics of UX.
Yes, I have very strong thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. Done.
All right, great. All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up there. Thanks for listening to episode 2 of We're Jabbin, where we discussed the value of a UX degree and whether you should get it or whether you should look elsewhere. Go ahead and subscribe to us on Apple, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc., wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you for listening to us.
Bye-bye.